I think it's not a big secret anymore that there is a lot of innovation going on in Europe. There's a lot of big tech companies being built. So what we lack a little bit is visibility, awareness of these great entrepreneurs that are coming from all over the place. So I'm delighted to have these three guys on the panel. We have a Frenchman, an Estonian, and a Dutch guy. Myself, I'm Belgian, so a very diverse panel. Can you briefly introduce your companies, please, starting from the left?
Yeah, okay, so I'm Nicholas from BlaBlaCar. So BlaBlaCar is it's a very simple concept. It's a marketplace between drivers and passengers, and we call that city-to-city ride sharing. So essentially the way it works very basically is as a driver, you go on BlaBlaCar, and when you're driving from a city to a city, let's say Munich to Berlin, for example, in Germany, you just offer your empty seats to passengers going the same way. And as a passenger, you go on BlaBlaCar and you're going to book those empty seats in other drivers' cars. So we started that a while back, and today we have over 10 million people actually using BlaBlaCar in Europe, and we carry over 2 million people every month.
Great. Taavet?
Hey, I'm Taavet Hinrikus. I'm co-founder of TransferWise. TransferWise is an online money transfer platform. To date, we've transferred more than £1 billion of customers' money.
Brilliant. Jitse?
Hello everybody, my name is Jitse. I founded Takeaway.com. That's a large food delivery website. We process about €500 million of food on our platform every single year. And we do this predominantly in Europe in about 10 countries.
Great, thank you guys. So you're making sure that people can get around, you make sure they don't get screwed by banks too much, you make sure they get fed. So, very good. So I want to touch on something that struck me when I was preparing for this panel, is that you're actually, Taavet, TransferWise is actually the youngest company on this couch. Jitse, I think you started Takeaway.com 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So we can't really speak of an overnight success. I think the foundation for BlaBlaCar was, I think, laid 10 years ago, something like that. So you're not small, young startups anymore, although you still operate a lot like the small startups. And Taavet, I think you started about 3 years ago at TransferWise. So I wanted to hear from Jitse, especially, the last 15 years. How did that come about? How did you end up starting these companies in the late 90s? And how did you get it to this point?
Oh, that's
It's a broad question, I know.
Yeah, yeah. No, I started out my company as a student company, actually with €50 as a startup capital. We've been around for quite some time because this sector took a long time to develop. We started out with very little orders. Grew the company, first of all, in Holland. I think that's one of the major issues in Europe, that the fact that we have borders and we have people talking other languages than you are doing. And started out in Holland, and then only, in fact, in 2008 we went to Belgium and Germany. So it was, let's say, a slow way to internationalization in that sense.
And did you raise money along the way?
We raised money only 4 years ago for the first time. Was 30 million euros, and we recently acquired Lieferando in Germany, which is a large German food delivery website, and we paid 74 million for that.
Nice. Okay. Nicola.
Yeah, so for us it's been, I mean, the history was interesting because the first, I think, website was back in 2004, 2005, actually, when Fred actually had the idea and you started to code the first website. But then we had this very sort of slow organic growth actually until probably 2008, 2009. And we had the first employee actually and the first angel funding in 2009. So you had this very slow incubation phase. And then we went into a phase of proving the business model, so having people ride sharing in France. And very quickly we made a choice. We decided that our market should not be France, actually our market should be Europe, right? So it's a choice we made pretty early on. And it's kind of a DNA change in a company where you say, well, actually we're not tackling France as a market, we're tackling all of Europe, right? So that's how we think of the market right now. So we had to, from 2010, 2011, we started to expand pretty quickly all over Europe. And we started with Spain and then the UK and then all of Europe. And I think that's probably one of the things actually that made the success we are today in a way, was really to expand the market and to really think of the market as being Europe, right? So I'm sure we're going to talk about that some more, but I think that's probably what we're missing in Europe, is to think Europe.
All right, so Taavet, you're building TransferWise out of London. You're one of the hottest fintech startups in Europe, easily. You've raised money from Richard Branson, Peter Thiel, Max Levchin from PayPal. But then, what does it mean being a hot fintech company in Europe? That means regulation. That means lots of currencies that you have to take into account. So how difficult has that been in the beginning?
So we've, I think one of the things when you think about growth of a company is always timing. I think maybe the two colleagues up on stage were a little bit too early starting their company. So we started TransferWise when I think the timing was perfect, that the trust in the banking system was at an all-time low, which enabled us to start growing this in a very, very rapid pace. And obviously, as we're in a regulated space, we have to deal with regulation, we have to deal with banking relationships in every new country on a daily basis. So that's also a reason why it has made a lot of sense for us to go down a venture-funded path instead of maybe a more slow burn organic route.
Right. So one of the things that a lot of US companies struggle with when they come to Europe is that they sometimes think about Europe as one whole, which it obviously isn't. It's very diverse, very fragmented, different culture, different languages, etc. But you've managed to scale your businesses all over Europe, different countries. But I wanted to hear from you what some of the issues were, what some of the challenges were in terms of international scaling. Start with Nicola.
Yeah, so the issue, so it's exactly what you said. I mean, the issue is, first, I think, again, it's a choice, right? So it's a choice you make as a company to define your market initially as being Germany or France or Holland or wherever you're from, actually, or to define it as a broader market, which can be Europe. Then the issue is, obviously, it's a fragmented market. You have languages issue, you have different regulations, you have different label law. But at the end of the day, it is manageable. It is manageable, and it's probably easier actually to expand in Europe, country by country, than to think that right away you're going to go, unless your market is there, but right away you're going to go to the US or right away you're going to go to Asia. So that's the choice we made. And then on how we've done it, so it was DNA change in the company. So it was really hiring people from all over Europe. It was setting up local teams very early. So in a strange way, we became like a multinational very early on. Like we had an office in London, an office in Madrid, even when we had like 20 people in the company. And then today we have 9 offices actually across the globe. And then the third thing we've done was, sometimes it's actually hard to hire in these countries. So we always had a dual track strategy where we either hired country managers in those countries to launch the market, or actually acquired companies, right? So we've done, in the past couple of years, past 3 years, we've done actually 4 acquisitions. And today what's interesting is the product of these acquisitions was bringing teams in. So it was really like a acquire strategy. So it was like not about like buying an asset, it was really about buying a team and bringing a team on board. And today it's about 50% of the member growth of BlaBlaCar is coming from these acquihires actually we've done in the last few years.
And some of your biggest markets are also Russia, Turkey, and coincidentally you raised a $100 million round not too long ago. And what struck me is that that money was raised without any mention of the US whatsoever. You didn't have any expansion plans to the US. So that was quite extraordinary.
Yeah, and I think that's something new, right? Because you're probably 5 or clearly 10 years ago, it would have been pretty hard to go to US investors or even European investors and say, hey, we need to raise $100 million to go global, but by the way, global does not include yet, at least the US. And today I think it resonates. So people get that, and when we talk to US investors, they just they were okay with that. Essentially, they say, yeah, you guys should go to Russia, you guys should go to Latin America, you should go to Asia, and maybe if you think the US is not your market right now, you don't need to go to the US. So I think it's changed. But also, the key point again is, I think the reason we've been able to do that is we could say we are a European company. So we sort of like, we've grabbed the European market, now we want to go global. I think it would have been super hard, almost impossible to say, hey, we have the UK, or we have Germany, or we have France, and now we want to go global and raise $100 million.
So it's actually pretty much the same story. You raised a $100 million round not long ago, also to do these kind of acquisitions to grow faster, quicker. So what are some of the things that you learned throughout all this, growing through acquisitions?
Well, I think doing business in Europe in general is difficult because you start out from the problem that you start out in a specific country. I started in Holland, so for me the reference was the country Holland. So I think it's exactly the same thing. You start up a company and you don't obviously think, oh, let's also start in Berlin when you still have no position in Holland. So your addressable market is small, but also your perceived market is small. Because you're a Dutch guy, you want to be the #1 in Holland rather than the #1 in Europe. Because Europe it's not like the US, right? It's a construction of a lot of different countries. What we've seen also is that it's very difficult to start in other countries because everything that you do in your own country kind of works, right? You start to become a larger company. So everything that you do in marketing pays off,
Right.
because you have a base. Then you move 1 kilometer over the border, and you're absolutely nobody over that border. Nobody knows you. You have to reinvent the entire company. There's different cultures. Well, in the case, for instance, between both of our countries, Belgians eat in the afternoon. You know, Dutch people eat a cheese sandwich, so they don't order food in the afternoon. In Belgium, they do. So that also requires a different strategy for that market. So it's very hard, and to Americans, you always have to explain. Well, you imagine going to Mexico and starting your business there. It's not entirely as different, obviously, in Europe. There are many things, fortunately, that are now better than they used to be,
right.
like international roaming. There are a couple of improvements in legislation that, in most countries, most laws are the same. Still not all laws, for some strange reason, but it's difficult to do it.
Right. And you compete against a couple of juggernauts in the space. Just Eat, public company, Delivery Hero raised over $600 million.
Yeah.
Massive companies. But TransferWise competes against banks, which is a whole different ballgame on its own. So how do you position yourself to the big financial institutions of the world?
So the core of why we're able to compete against the banks is because we're offering a fundamentally better service. We keep our users in mind. We're offering something which is faster. We're offering something which is lower cost, and something which has an awesome user experience. I totally believe that consumers want their banks to be like Spotify or Skype nowadays. So we thought about that when we were designing our product. How do we make it fast? How do we make it super transparent and very easy to use? So having such a fundamentally better product means you have much better word of mouth, which means your virality is higher, which means your growth rate is much higher. And that really enables us to go out there and offer something which the banks can't.
It sounds like a very appealing offer to consumers. Are you getting traction? What's the volume you're doing these days?
So we've transferred more than £1 billion of customers' money, and we've been growing the business around 15–20% on a monthly basis for the past 2 years.
Impressive. And which currencies do you support at the moment?
It's a list of about 22 currencies, so it would take me a while to recite it. But that's still the very beginning. I think we're just getting started. We have a team of about 160 people. But thinking about how big the market is ahead of us, what we have right now is the very tip of the iceberg, and we're just operating right now in Europe. So there's so much more we can do.
Right. So one of the biggest problems that Europe faces and will face in the next few years, this isn't an easy problem to solve, is the fact that we don't have this, the single digital market that everyone keeps talking about, different VAT structures that we talked about, borders, different labor laws. If you would have the power to change one of those, what would it be? Labor laws? Would it be regulation? Would it be VAT? What would you change if you had the power?
Are you asking me?
Anyone?
I think VAT is the most important problem that we have. We have 6 offices, and we are in 10 countries. So we operate, for instance, in Austria, we operate out of Holland rather than out of Austria itself. It's very difficult to send invoices to local companies. Obviously, between larger companies, it's not an issue. But in our case, with delivery restaurants, when you have to charge a different VAT rate, or you have to charge no VAT at all, like the deferred VAT tax, that's incredibly difficult. And our users, our restaurants, don't understand that. So that would be the one that I would change.
Nicola?
Yeah, I would say I think at the end of the day it is changing. So it is going in the right direction. What I would change is maybe the speed of change actually. So it's just changing too slowly, right? So if we could change the speed of change, that'd be the best. But you talked about VAT. I think another challenge we have is you need to set up companies in every country you go to if you want to have a local team. So if at some point you could say, okay, we have some kind of like European corporation type company, you incorporate that in the UK or in Germany or in France, it doesn't matter, and then you can hire all over Europe. That would be a lot simpler, right? So today that's one of the challenges. Every time you want to expand to new countries, at least physically, you need to worry about regulation, you need to worry about labor laws, you need to worry about all these things. So I think it's going in the right direction in terms of like regulation, in terms even of taxes and VAT. It is going in the right direction. It's just going pretty slowly.
All right.
I would look at labor laws. I think making it easier to hire and fire people is something which would be critical to the rate of growth of companies in Europe. I mean, right now, if you look at some of the countries like France, where firing people is incredibly hard, which means people are very hesitant to hire. And also, if you look at the kind of what's a norm is in Europe, with people often having 3 or 6 months notice periods, I mean, that doesn't work with startups. If you look at the US with at-will employment, things are much quicker. You hire someone, they leave the company, the previous company, the next day they start working you 2 days after. I hired someone, I gotta wait 6 months. It's just freaking ridiculous. So changing the labor laws and the norms, I think, would be incredibly helpful.
Right. So I touched on this earlier, but there's and this is a real problem, the lack of growth capital. I think early stage startups don't necessarily have a lot of problems getting capital in Europe, especially not in the mature ecosystems. The big problem is when you need the 20 to $100 million rounds to scale up. Then you have to go typically outside of Europe to get that money. And that was the case with you guys with the $100 million round. You also raised money from US investors. So was the problem that you couldn't find that kind of capital in Europe, or was it just because the US investors came knocking first?
I think it's an irrelevant problem. I'm kind of very pragmatic. I think the best entrepreneurs go to the best investors wherever they are. You can hop on a plane, you can fly to the US, you're going to be there the same day. So I think that problem is irrelevant. Best companies find the best investors. Best capital comes to the best companies. No investor I've spoken to in the US has ever had an issue with us being a European company with only a service in Europe.
Makes sense. Jitse, you raised money from an Australian bank.
Australian bank, yeah. That's.
So how did that come about?
Well, that for us it was a logical pick because they actually were also an investor in Lieferando, in the German company. So that's why we got involved with Macquarie. But it's true that most of the European investors, they might be able to fund a larger round, but they don't really understand e-commerce yet. So that's why most people end up with a foreign investor in that sense. I think it's not unreal. I mean, and it doesn't really matter. I think that's correct. It doesn't really matter where you get your money from. But it is true that most of the times the money does not come from Europe.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the lies we like to tell ourselves actually sometime in Europe is that we don't build big companies because we lack funding and we cannot get funding, and the issue comes from the European VC industry. I think maybe it's partially true, but I think it's mostly wrong actually. And you have lots of examples of European companies raising from the US, from Russia, from Australia, from wherever actually. So today it's maybe easier than ever to raise from anywhere, right? If you want to raise money. So the challenge is more like you're building enough of a footprint initially, so that you have a big enough company or a big enough story to go fundraise. And I remember like when I was when we were fundraising, so just like 9 months ago. I was in this meeting in Silicon Valley with a US investor that never invested in France. And I was, so we had the old presentation, the guy was really excited, and I asked like, okay, but would you invest in a French company? And we had this slide actually with like all the global expansion of BlaBlaCar and all the flags in all the countries and so on. And he said, well, look, I mean, the way I look at that is you're a global company and you happen to be HQ'd in France, which is just like a legal technical thing for me. So, which, probably partially true, maybe not, but, it's interesting because that's what we need to get to. We need to get to, okay, what matters is like what footprint do you address? Is it Europe? Is it bigger than Europe? And if you build a company on a big footprint, then you can go fundraise from Silicon Valley, from New York, from wherever you want, right? So it's more about like the initial ambition and footprint you create, the market you create, than the funding environment, I think.
Completely different question for you, but you've managed to kind of avoid the problems that companies like Uber have run into in Europe with regulation, and how have you managed to do that? I know it's very specific about your business model. Can you briefly shed some light on that?
So what we do is it's interesting because sometimes we either get confused for car rental or Uber. Actually, we operate in a completely different space, right? We operate in long-distance city-to-city ride-sharing. So it's about people going from Berlin to Munich or Madrid to Valencia or Paris to Brussels. And the way it works is fundamentally the driver does not make a profit, right? So we make sure the driver is actually sharing his cost or her cost of driving from, let's say, Paris to Brussels. And when you do that, essentially, if you don't make a profit, if you just cost sharing, essentially you don't have tax issues. You're not going to pay tax on that. You don't have any regulation issues either because you're not a commercial driver or a professional driver, so you don't need to be regulated. And you don't have any insurance issues. So one of the reasons we've been able to scale actually with essentially no legal issue, no regulation issue, is we've been able to find, which is great actually, a band where we have no regulation, no tax, and no insurance issues.
Yeah. TransferWise charges, I think, a fixed fee, a fair fee compared to banks. What are your margins like, or is it a volume play? Do you need lots of volume to start making money, or?
So payments typically are a high volume business, but if I look at our cost structure, it's a very healthy, high margin business, similar to the likes of Google and other online companies. We do have our cost, which is paying to our partners, which are often banks, for the payments we're making, but it's a very healthy business.
And so, do you have plans to move from currency exchange to other types of payment services and banking?
We reckon that the money transfer in total is about 5 to 10 trillions on an annual basis, so it's a very large market which will keep us busy for a long time. I think you have to really be very focused to build a great company, and for us, focusing on how do we build the best way to transfer money is what's going to keep us busy for a long time.
All right. So Jitse, you started Takeaway in 1999, as I said earlier. It was a long time ago. No smartphones, no tablets back then. How have you seen mobile impacting your business?
Well, I like to think of the whole internet thing as revolution. So first, in our business, we just moved the customer from the phone call to the internet, right? First you ordered your pizza via the phone, now you do it over the internet. So now we're working on another revolution, moving those internet customers to mobile. And in our company, 60% of orders are now mobile throughout Europe. And there are a couple of countries that are far ahead, like Austria, and there are a couple of countries that are lagging in the mobile use, like Germany. Germany is far behind. I think Germany will be 35% will be mobile use, and it's a good mobile product, right? It's food delivery from your pocket, so that's very suitable to that. I think that's a revolution that's going. Also, what we're now doing is moving people that have never used the internet directly to the mobile phone. We are also the #1 in Vietnam, for instance, and there people don't even have computers, so they go immediately to the mobile phone. But this is a very interesting thing that's happening, and this revolution is going much faster than let's say the first revolution, moving things to the internet, because that was a fairly lengthy process, because internet has been around for quite some time now. And it took a long time actually to get people to use the internet adequately, and also to use their mobile phones. And I think one of the important drivers of the mobile phone growth was actually the use of Facebook. I think a lot of people had no real clear thought about what to do with the mobile phone until Facebook was actually available on the mobile phone. And then people started to be educated in the use of that, and that also helped us.
All right, we're out of time. Great European success stories. I hope you keep following these companies very closely. Thank you very much, guys.